Today we are here at Colonel Bob Trailhead. This is a new trail to me, and we'll be testing out my gear for pacing at Bigfoot 200. Looks like I'll be pacing about 100 miles. And this trail here ought to be a good test for my equipment. Let's see what we can get into. Now this hike was steep from the get-go and all the way to the top. Much slower getting to the top than getting down. As a total of 9 hours, probably 6.5 going up, 2.5 down. Feeling pretty tight from about mid-back to mid-buttocks. So I'm going to try to work that out before I go any further. This is just the beginning of the hike and I'm already feeling tightness there, so I want to take care of it. This is a very technical trail from the get-go. Lots of loose, chunky rocks, windy track, brush all over. Some of the brush will even hide your feet in some pretty technical spots. So you got to be sure to go slow and really pay attention to where you're putting your feet. I'm really liking the decision to stop and stretch. The tightness in that area has gone, and the mechanics are smooth. The hike's going much easier. This is a steep hike in the beginning, it seems like. I don't know how long it stays steep. We'll see. But to have that tightness going on would have been miserable. So made it easy on myself by just taking a couple minutes to work it out. If you've made it this far, comment hydrate. There are quite a few down trees here, but luckily I've been practicing how to navigate down trees in order to be the best pacer I can be at the Bigfoot 200. Here you can see a brief example of the technical trail I'm talking about. You got chunky rocks, down trees, and twisting and turning at the same time. This is a small example of the kind of brush you're going to deal with, the kind of trail you're going to be dealing with, and later on it encroaches on the path even more. So again, you got to really be paying attention to your footwork. Some of the views here are starting to pop out, and even just a brief view, you get very excited, and it's what keeps me going. Well, the new bladder failed already, so I'm going to use this LifeStraw here at this little waterfall. I suggest everyone carry one just in case you have a malfunction like this one. And eventually we will be out exposed to the sun. So we're going to dip our rag right now and get prepared for that. Now our shoulders are draped in a wet rag, so when we get out in that heat, it's not going to be so bad. You should definitely take plenty of water. I had 2 liters in my reservoir, and I drank all of it, and I used my LifeStraw plenty of times. figured out that the new reservoir worked and I was just using it wrong. So ultimately I really dig the new reservoirs I was trying out. Now here is an example of some of the more extreme down tree areas out there, and there's some that are even worse than this, but I didn't want to try and be using my phone and navigating the down trees at the same time. Here we are coming up to the historic Mulkey Shelter. Dates back to the early Forest Service area. Has about four bunk beds in there and a fire pit. Nice little spot. Looks a little dilapidated. Getting our shoes wet here, which is good for the test. And then just more tricky footwork navigating these downed trees and the chunky debris all over the place. I did fall 3 times total during this 14.5-mile hike, which I normally don't fall at all. So I don't know if that gives you any sort of idea of the technicality of it, but you really have to pay attention to what's going on. And now we're into the thick brush. You're going to encounter stuff like this many, many times, and you can barely see your feet, and you might even be on a bit of an edge. So you have to be paying close attention. There's even some wet spots where there might be a spring or a trickle coming through. So again, be very, very careful. Getting into some of the beautiful flowers you'll see blossoming up there. This is in the Olympic National Forest. And while I'm talking about it, this hike is not for beginners. Might not even be for moderate. It was a very tough climb. Downhill wasn't so tough, but if you're not used to this kind of hiking, it can be hard on your knees. So come prepared. Jill Deptis, man, she just goes and goes and goes. This is one of the toughest hikes, if not the toughest 14.5-mile hike I've ever done. And she just goes and goes, and she was running downhill in the end and even wanted to get out and play at each of the stops on the way home. Next day, we were working in yards, and she was sprinting around the yards and stopped by the prairie to get out some more of her energy, and it did not work. She's still going as I record this voiceover. Finally at mile 7 and reaching the top. When I got to the top, there was a guy there. He said this was the toughest hike he had ever done. But at the same time, there was a guy there who worked out in the area who seemed to just breeze through the entire trail. He was either behind me or in front of me the entire time and set what I would call a mountain goat pace. Wasn't breathing hard and was just kind of bopping along, enjoying the hike. It was also his first time up there. It is not a crowded hike, but when I reached to the top, there were 3 other people that reached the top at the same time. It was all our first times up there. There is not much room up there, so even with just 4 people, it was rather crowded. So I would suggest trying to get there on a weekday, and that way you hopefully get the spot all to yourself. 360 views. From the summit, you can see Mount Olympus, Lake Quinault, the Quinault Rainforest, the Pacific Ocean, Grace Harbor, and the wild drainages of the Wainuchi. And on very clear days, you can see Mount Rainier. A total of 14.5 miles in just over 9 hours and 5,081 feet of elevation. Again, not for beginners, but worth the climb. I would suggest that you plan for an all-day hike.